So, as we talked in the first video, capitalism is this economic system where consumers and producers pretty much get to answer those economic questions on how to provide for people in society. The difference here is that there is some government intervention in it, in this type of system, unlike a free market, which is very closely related to this. So, we also talked about two big characteristics: the idea of private property rights and this profit motive. Another characteristic that makes capitalism its own thing is this idea of the role of the government. So, unlike a free market system, there is some government intervention in a capitalistic society. Now, that is limited. You're not going to see a ton of government intervention, but some of those big problems with a free market, in that if you want something, you have to pay for it. It leaves people out. There's no economic security. Capitalism looks to address those problems. And so that's kind of the role of the government with those. So one of their big focuses is to provide that economic security, right? If there is something that happens in the economy that is beyond your control, um, you don't want to just be left out or left to fend for yourself. The government in a capitalistic society is going to be there to provide some kind of support if you are facing some hard times. So you could see some unemployment. If you get hurt on the job, there could be some workers' comp. We're also looking to find a way to make sure that the products that businesses are putting out are actually safe for consumers and that workers are being protected. So you would see some laws in place, making sure that the resources that are being used or the products that are being produced aren't going to be harmful to consumers. Um, you're going to see laws like maybe a limit on how many hours workers can work a week, or there could be some minimum wage, um, things like that. They'll also look to address one of the problems of having, like, if businesses are free to do whatever they want, they're usually not focused on what are we doing to the environment. And so some government regulation is going to focus on protecting water and air and that kind of thing. So they're still limited. We're not wanting a ton of social programs from the government or a ton of regulation for businesses. It's going to stay pretty minimal, but they're here to, again, fix some of those problems with the free market system. And then, as we kind of talked about in the other video yesterday, to provide some public goods so that you don't have to pay directly for everything, right? We talked about roads and education, police and fire departments, national defense, those kinds of things that benefit everybody, that make society better, makes life better to have. You can just use your tax dollars to pay for, and the government is in charge of running those things. So we do see some public sector involvement that exists here. Again, public sector is things that the government is providing, but it is very limited, very small. We still want in this system a ton of economic freedom so that businesses and consumers have the ability to still do the things they want to do and operate how they want to operate, buy the things you want to buy, and all that good stuff, right? But there is some kind of government involvement here. So, things we've kind of talked about in the two videos here, but with capitalism, a few of the pros that exist from this system. The first is that you see a lot faster development and advancement in these societies to go from a traditional system or any other kind of system. When these capitalistic values are adopted and put into place, society really just takes off. And you'll see a ton of economic growth happen very quickly because of that profit motive. It encourages people to be innovative and find better ways of doing things and new products. And that just makes life better for everyone involved. And so those leaps and bounds are accomplished more. And when we look at the world and we look at different countries and how did they advance so quickly, it's because of capitalism. It has the best track record of any of these systems when we're looking at making life better. So that translates into higher standard of living. So people have the opportunity to make more money, to advance their lives, to make things better for themselves and their families. When you're trying to do things, you have um, products that make life easier. So you don't have to do everything quite so hard. And that's really kind of what that standard of living is looking like here. Right, because of that economic freedom, there is a lot of ability for you personally to pursue your path in life. You are free to choose what you're going to do, and that can be as much or as little effort as you want it to be. Right, we talked yesterday, if you're wanting to be a millionaire, you find a way to make that happen, right? And you have that opportunity for that to happen because there is so much economic freedom. Now, it doesn't mean you're guaranteed to get it, but their opportunity is there for that. Unlike some of the other systems, that's not there, right? It's also a system in which no matter what you're born into, you're not stuck in that system. So if you're born in some inner city with that you're not making much money, your family doesn't come for much, you're not stuck in that system. You have any opportunity available to you to advance, right? So those are some of the pros that are here. Some of the disadvantages, though, is that you do see um, because there is that such a varying degree of what you can get out of the system, we do tend to see some people that end up really rich and some people that end up not so rich. And there is a gap between that wealthy and not wealthy, because equity is not really that important, because the focus here is on you get out what you put in, right? And unfortunately, that does mean that some people end up more disadvantaged than others. That opportunity is still there, but sometimes it is more difficult for people to reach those goals that they have than it is for others. Um, like I said, the environment is one of the things that businesses and individuals may not think about because they're just really trying to make life better, make as much money as you can, and thinking about, well, these things that we're dumping during our production process, or things we're putting into the air, not really at the front of people's thoughts. And so that's one of the reasons we have the government to get involved, to kind of fight those unintended, we call them externalities. So another word for like consequences, right? Um, but you do see a lot more of that in this system, because again, that's really not the focus there. And that's why you need to kind of have that government involvement. There is a chance, like with most systems, for um, businesses to really take advantage of the system. If you are a big business, big corporation, you have more opportunity um, to make money and to influence politicians. And so you're able to benefit from the system more. Now, in capitalism, there is still a limit on how much like subsidies are given out by the government. So those would be like tax breaks given to businesses, and saying, okay, well, you did these things, so you don't have to pay as much in taxes. They're there to change the tax code for businesses. That opportunity is there because big businesses make a lot of money, and that gives them a lot of influence. So if you ever hear the term crony capitalism, that's kind of what that's referring to. The fact that big businesses, if they're influencing um, legislatures or people in the government and saying, hey, we'll fund your campaign as long as you do these things once you get elected. And if you don't do them, we'll find someone else that will. That's what crony capitalism is. So there is the chance that a capitalistic society could turn into that. But it's not guaranteed that it's going to turn into that. But because big business has that money there, then that could happen. Now, politically, with capitalism, because that idea of freedom is so highly valued, you would see that translate into greater society. You're going to typically see a political system that values freedom in general, your political freedom, your social freedom, And so you would see a republic or a democracy in place with elected officials that are responsible and uh, um, I can't think of the word right now, but that they would answer to their constituents, the people that elected them, and that the people would have that power that say, if we don't like what you're doing, we're going to vote you out. Just like they have that power to say to businesses, if we don't like how you're producing, we won't buy your product. Or if we don't like the product you're making, we're not going to buy it. So a lot of power rests with the consumers and with the people in this type of system, both politically and economically. Um, but there would just be a lot of freedoms. The government would have laws in place protecting those freedoms, just like they have laws protecting your economic freedoms. And so those things typically go hand in hand. You're not going to ever see a country that is like an authoritarian government but has capitalism in place, because they go against each other, right? Authoritarianism is the government wanting to control everything. And if you have a ton of economic freedom, you can't have an authoritarian government. So those two things cannot go together. All right. So that's it for capitalism. If you have questions, things that aren't making sense, or you want to ask about, email me and I'll address them.